What do you want out of Hunter this spring and the quarterback position as a whole, since all of them are here, I think?
Yeah, I think in general, whether it's Hunter, whether it's across the board, I think consistency, of what's being asked of them is really important. And I think that's really been the demand since we've come back is, you saw a team last year at times that was high and low and lacked consistency in some moments. And I think when you're young, that is part of the growing process. And so I think we'll be our best team across the board if we have great consistency. And obviously the guy that is handling the football the most, consistency has to start at the quarterback position.
Will he be pushed?
Oh, I think everybody's pushed right now. The head coach is being pushed. Our coaches are being pushed. Our players are being pushed. So, I think anytime you don't reach the results that you would want, I think there's a deep dive in everybody's accountability to being pushed to be the best. So I don't think anybody is not being pushed right now in our football program.
You've talked before, I think the last time that we were here, you talked about the offensive line, how you felt, bringing in Coach Clanton was more you believe in those guys in that room. You just felt like there were some things that maybe could be done a little bit differently. What is it about that group that you see out of them that makes you feel confident that they can take some strides here forward this next year?
Well, I think even when you go back and you watch the video, Jared, there's individual successes from a year ago. There was, there are guys that are doing really good things. And you look 2020, 21, and even at times in 22, the offensive line, it's hard because you judge the collective whole, right? And but there are a lot of individual pieces there that are having great success. And a lot of guys have played a lot of football for us and played it at a really high level at times. And, I think the thing that the small reward that I've watched in 8 weeks, the transformational physical change that has occurred in that group, and I think sometimes that's hard when you have older guys to make such drastic physical changes, but you're seeing that. Tyler Miller, I think 338 pounds right now, and man, looks great. Darrell Simmons, what he looks like, even Jake Remsburg, Jake's been through a lot of injuries, and this is the first time he's actually had a true offseason where he's been able to work through the entirety of the offseason, even physically what he and Grant Triber look like. So, I think for that group, there's a lot of guys that have played a lot of football, and a lot of times they played really well, and it kind of goes back to my, response to Randy. Consistency, if we want to be the best, we have to be able to consistently play at our best, and I have great expectation that group can do that. They certainly have the talent and ability to do that, and now we've got to put that together.
In answering Randy's question, I heard you say results before process, which I think is an all-time first for you. Mm-hmm. But I'm curious, how much does last year inform or drive these guys heading into spring?
Yeah, and I think the great thing about going back to that, the result piece of it, it wasn't per se the result. It's how we got to the result. And, that's where that process piece comes in. And I think that's the thing when you look at the end result of being inconsistent. We were inconsistent at times with our process, of how we do what we do. And I know I said that a lot, right after the season. And I think I said that the last time we met. And I think that's where our deep dive has been globally, how we train, how we study film, how we teach, to how we learn and play the game of football. And so I think just the how is really what we've been after. It's not the talent. It's not the not knowing how to do it. It's really going back and redefining the how in everything we do. So, obviously the result is not what you wanted, but it was how we got there that was probably so frustrating, and knowing that those were the areas that we needed to clean up. And, you look at all those games and the result piece of it, you are still right there. And the reality of it is, the frustration wasn't the result of it, it's how we got the result of it. And I think those are things that we can control. And when that happens, those are the frustrating pieces of it.
I think when we met, whenever it was, Jairell was the guy you weren't sure if he was going to be able to practice. What's his status, and anybody else?
Yeah, so we've had a couple guys that got cleaned up, after the season. And I think one thing that I do know is everybody will be at least able to participate in practice. Now, a guy even like Jairell, I think he's probably accelerated his opportunities to compete in spring practice. But, I think we'll have some guys that will be limited in spring that you won't see. Deshaun Hanukkah, I think we'll practice this spring but be limited. Cartavius got cleaned up on a couple things. I think we'll be able to practice but limited. Jeremiah Cooper able to practice but limited. Isaiah Lee, Jared Hufford, Tyler Miller, all being able to practice but limited, and all those guys, that's part of the deal too. A year ago, you dealt with a lot of those things, but at least everybody's trending, and everybody I expect on the practice field working at their craft.
I guess two things. Is that list a typical length? I guess I have no idea. And then you mentioned 2 running backs. What's that do for your room if those top 2 guys are limited?
Yeah, I think it certainly feeds. I'll answer the first question with the second question, the running back piece. It certainly gives, a guy like Eli Sanders a great opportunity to continue. You saw him really have a great finish to the season. You certainly see a guy like A.J. Harris who's coming in. Man, it's great that he comes in and gets the opportunity to get great reps. I think we have a very firm confidence in, what Jairell can do and needs the reps to practice, but we know what type of player he is and, feel very confident what Cartavius has got the ability to be. So, I think and then we'll gain a couple running backs in the summer, that we feel very confident about is coming in our football program. So I think what it does is it gives those guys great opportunity to grow and get better. And I do think a year ago, probably the most injuries we've dealt with, in a season since you've been here. And, that's football. It's going to happen. And so whether it's long or short, it's part of the journey. Our responsibility is the next guy up needs to be prepared to play. And that's our responsibility as coaches and as a program.
Matt, you referenced the term deep dive, which you use on an annual basis after the season ends. Yeah. How was this deep dive in the offseason maybe different? Obviously more staff turnover than usual, but how was it different, and what did you glean from it heading into this spring?
Yeah, I think probably more personal than anything. I think, it's probably rare that you have the opportunity in our profession to be at one place for, 7 going in our 8th football season. And, there's been a lot of great things that have occurred here. And, there's also been opportunities where maybe you feel like you could have been better than what the result of what occurred looked like, and that's why I've always said, man, I'm not after this or this. We're trying to be the best version of us every year. And that's not like lip service. Like, that's really what I'm after. That's really what I feel like gives us here at Iowa State the best opportunity to be successful. And, whether that's myself, whether that's our coaching staff, whether that's any part of the program that touches our kids, that's really what I try to do a great job evaluating, and I probably the deepest dive this year was just on, man, where are we and where are you at, and where are we, where are we maybe off that we're not serving our kids the absolute best way. And so, I think there were, as I said at the end of the season, I think it starts with me. And, I've got to be a better head football coach and have to do a better job making sure that everything that's touching our program is giving our kids every opportunity to have the most success possible. So, I probably would say that's the most different. I think the reality is you're very confident in, where we are still, and what our program is about, and probably very proud of what that looks like. I hear those 3 guys get interviewed after Pro Day on Tuesday, and you're like, that's Iowa State football. That's what our program's really about. Obviously, we want to have great success every season we touch the field, and every game we play, we want to win. But at the end of the day, it's still about doing it the right way and building men of character. And I think every team that we have has great power and great potential, and it's our responsibility now at this point to give that growth opportunity in the full power and potential of this team to flourish. So that's really where the deep dive looked, and again, it started with me, and I think trying to make sure we align the program to, as I've told our kid, one football culture, not multiple cultures, one culture.
And a quick follow-up, how critical is it to have, you've got the bedrock principles, you've got the things up on the wall, but then again, as you mentioned, longevity at a job, you've got to tweak some things.
Sure.
And does that tie into the deep dive? It's like update 2.0, that type of stuff?
Oh, I think in anything, right? In life, you have to have enough humility to evaluate, what you're doing well and what you're not doing well. And at times have the courage to, try to do what's best for the overall structure for everybody involved. And, I think those are things that aren't easy, because those are hard things to do. But I think one of the great things that you have is such a great foundation. And, I think that's one of the, I would still say even one of the beauties of last year, probably one of the great prides that I took from last football season, is how hard our kids played. I felt like we were probably a little bit off culturally in 21. I didn't love where we were in 21. But man, I loved where we were in 22 from a cultural standpoint, how our kids did what they did, at least how they practiced, how they came to work every day. How they never quit and how they played till the very end of the game, and, obviously didn't get some of the results that we would have wanted to get. I think more of the mismatch maybe was how we were helping those guys get to that standpoint. So, and again, that starts with the head football coach, and then those are things where, you've got to do a better job, and I'm talking to me, of putting those kids in the best position to be successful from a global standpoint. I'm not just talking a scheme or a call or anything. I'm talking everything that touches the program. Are we doing everything in our power to give our kids every opportunity to be their best?
Out of the guys you brought in January, what have kind of been the early thoughts of them going through the weight room?
You
and
were going to ask me that question.
I always do. You got to look ahead to the future in my role, but especially like the three transfer guys, are they guys that you're seeing are going to contribute this year?
Yeah, and I think that's so hard with this team, and it is a great question, and you should ask that question. But I think probably even until we get through spring practice, it's going to be really hard to answer that. I think there is so much unknown about this team in a lot of ways, in terms of, man, who can consistently play at the expectation and standard for us to be our best. And I would say really from an excitement level of the guys that we have brought in, you talk about Jaden Higgins, obviously, is one of those players, man, really impressive, great work ethic, has had a phenomenal offseason already. Zach Lovett, uber impressive, work ethic, man, 244 pounds, big, strong, looks like he can really run. A.J. Harris, really impressive offseason so far. So all three of those guys come with really good standards of how they've carried themselves and how they've worked and what their bodies look like. So I think they're certainly going to be primed and for the opportunity to compete once spring practice happens. I think the freshmen that have come in maybe are the most mature group of freshmen that I have seen step in our football program since I've been here. And I think the positive for them is all those kids come from winning high school football programs. Your Jack Sadowski, what the senior year he had, plays in the high school state championship. We know what JJ did. Man, you can go across the board with all those freshmen played in great high school football programs. So I think the maturity of that group, Benny Nagoya, man, those guys have all really done a great job. Kai Black, those guys have come in, been really, really impressive. JJ Jean-Louis played in a great high school football program. And, those guys have been impressive. So I think the competition through the spring will be really impressive. And quite honestly, we're going to get another really special group coming in June. So I think by the time you get to August, I really don't know if you'll know what this team really looks like and who's stepping on the field early in the season until we really get midway through fall camp. But I think that's the exciting part, because you get to really build this team, and you can kind of give it a slow build up until till the early mid portion of fall camp right now.
How does adding Coach Langs into the equation change the way you guys approach the process of building your special teams through the spring?
Yeah, I don't know if there's a global schematic change. Schematically what we've done in special teams. I think the biggest thing that you get with a special teams coordinator, and again, I would tell you, like, we've had special teams coordinator, even here at Iowa State. Joe Houston was a special teams coordinator. Brian Gasser was a special teams coordinator our first 3 years. Man, at Toledo, we always had a special teams coordinator. And so we've kind of done both. And one of the things I do like about having a special teams coordinator, or one voice, is that there's a central location to the verbiage that's coming out of his mouth. There's a unity of all 4 phases kind of getting the same language, the same lingo. And you also have one person that is really evaluating in terms of position, are we building the depth charts the right way? So if we have injury, we've got the right guys filling in. I think those are all real positives when you look at that. And, I think Coach Langs will do a great job of that. I think, in terms of organization, drill work, man, we do spend a lot of time on that. It's really important. I'm a huge believer in obviously special teams play, and I'm involved in it myself. But the reality of that situation is that's the great value of having a special teams coordinator. So I am excited to have somebody that's building the foundation of that.
Along that line, then, where does the field goal kicking situation lie right now?
Yeah, again, I would say, one thing that I have firm belief in is Jace Gilbert. I think that, what we asked Jace to do a year ago was probably a little bit of coaching. Jace was the punter. Jace was the kickoff guy. Jace was the field goal kicker. And Jace was a guy that just got off the baseball diamond and was the shortstop and the starting pitcher and was the point guard on the basketball team. And, I think we asked a lot of him a year ago instead of singular focus early on and letting him just be the point scorer. I think Jace is uberly talented. And I think a little bit of asking so much of him early probably created some of the inconsistencies, and some of that is on us, And so I think Jace has got all the talent in the world to be an elite kicker. And so, we're really excited, even just the growth that he's made both physically and fundamentally over the course of the last 8 to 10 weeks. And, I obviously he would be the starting point. And, we got Keegan Shackelford that we did a great job as a kickoff guy that can certainly kick for us and will be in the mix as well. And then, Bittman is another young man that's got great leg strength and probably a little bit more of a kickoff guy than a true field goal kicker, point scorer, but also has the ability to do that as well. So great competition across the board there. But, I think all those guys and, Jace, we certainly have great belief in as well.
What's Jalen have to do to take the next step, and does he have Xavier Hutchinson potential in him?
Well, I think the thing that Jalen has that I'll never forget the year he comes in, the training partner that he had year one was Brock. And those two started off training in January and February, and it was those two together. And, I think very much like X, that those two, how they practice every day, the demeanor, the mindset, the consistency that they've got the ability to show up every day. Jalen's been uberly mature from day one. And I think the next step in his football game is consistency as well. His ability to make that catch, to make that play. I think there were times last year where you felt Jalen wanted to make the play so bad that, fundamentally he might have been a hair off on a couple plays. But, man, Jalen's made huge plays for us. He's got all the tools and athleticism. It's not a maturity or growth factor for him. He's a grown man. He knows how to play the game. He practices like a pro already. Now it's kind of putting it all together, and I think that's part of going from your sophomore year to your junior year. So we've got great belief in Jalen Knoll, who he is, one of the great leaders in our program, at least in how to come in every day and go to work and what the standard should look like. He does a great job of that for us in our program.
Hey Matt, what are some of your early impressions and thoughts on the tight end group? Obviously, you've got some guys that played a lot coming back, but also it would seem a lot of young talent and depth there too.
Yeah, that group a year ago, I thought really grew as the season went. I thought that was one group that really made great growth from where they were early in the season to where they were by the mid and end point of the season. And certainly it starts with Deshaun and Easton. Easton, man, a guy that had to battle through injury really almost the entirety of the football season, was never healthy, but really played well through injury, which is not easy to do, and I think it's a credit to the toughness that he has about himself. And then I thought really Deshaun Hanukkah, I thought just kept getting better and better and better as the season went on. So I think when you talk about that room, you're really excited about that. At practice, probably from about the midpoint on, Gabe Burkle was the guy that, was on the verge of getting on the football field the entirety of the rest of the season. He was a guy that, man, you're talking 270-pound, big, physical, great route runner, great hands. Really was impressive. He was. I always think it's hard for a freshman that redshirts to consistently show up through the entirety of the season because you're not getting the result of playing. Man, Gabe was really, really impressive. Andrew Keller has went from 215 pounds to almost 240 pounds right now. Really has made great strides physically. I think he's a guy that certainly has got great tools, great ability. And then Steve Klotz, I really think Steve-O was a guy that, again, kind of was in the Russ, form of that kind of hybrid H-back / tight end, and really had a great fall camp last year. Jared was injured for the majority of fall camp. Got injured right at the end of spring ball last year, and Steve-O had probably one of the top guys coming out of fall camp. Jared kind of came back, so they ended up splitting the reps, but we really have a great belief in Steve-O. I think that room's got a chance to be really, really talented, and then obviously you got Ben Bramer coming in at some point here too. So I think as a collective whole, that group's really talented. Tyler Moore was a guy as well. Battled injury in fall camp a year ago, and then really started to come on as the season went too. So I think that just that room in general is a really impressive room, and I think it's got a chance to be really, really talented going forward.
I think we've seen spring take on a lot of different forms in your 7 or 8 years.
Mm-hmm.
What did you land on this year in terms of scheduling, function, form of what you wanted to accomplish and what it's going to look like over the next month plus?
Yeah, I think I came away a year ago really happy with how spring practice looked, and really probably fall camp. I felt like us getting off to a good start and not just even with the win or the loss, but how we played early, I think was a tribute into, I think we've maybe found the right formula for us in spring and fall camp. So, I don't think those will be drastic changes. Spring practice last year was competitive, and, you guys got to see a lot of that just because of the open practices at some of the high schools. I think it'll take on a very similar form. It's such a young team. Competition and evaluation is going to be really important for us. And nor do I think we'll come out of this and be, man, we're going to know exactly what the starting lineup's going to look like on both sides of the ball. I think that would be false. We're so young that you still want to grow physically through spring practice. We're going to still lift Monday, Wednesday, Fridays and try to continue our physical growth and development. But to be able to get some of our new coaches, be on the practice field with these coaches, really continue to hone in on fundamentals, and then create competitive environments so we can grow as a football program. I think it's really critical and really a very similar model to what we tried to do a year ago.
I think maybe for the first time in a long time that you got both your defensive ends moving on. What do you look at that position group as a whole on the defensive line, and how new guys got to step up into just maybe some of the big issues in program history?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and a question that you should ask, because I feel like it was the same part of the videotape that I took into our defensive staff, and you just realize the value that not only we know what Will did, but I think MJ really played great football for us to the midpoint to the end of the football season. And so I think what is positive though is you saw Joey Peterson's role significantly increase a year ago, and he played really good football for us. I think you obviously saw T.O.'s role drastically, increase when J.R. Singleton went down and we lost him at the midpoint of the season. And man, T.O. played great football, and at points was probably playing as well as MJ was, at the end of the football season. So, we got some great pieces there, and then you got some great talent. You certainly talk about Ikenna, we've talked about Oswago. I think he is as talented as any young defensive lineman that we've had in our football program. J.R. Singleton coming back, I think the experience from a year ago was really great. Physically, he's at the best he's looked. Dom got great experience a year ago, played really good. It's great to have a cornerstone there and Isaiah Lee leading that room. So there's a lot of talent. There's a lot of competition. Some of these young guys that are coming in, I think will certainly push. But, man, what are they going to do with it? Did you learn from your experiences a year ago? Man, are you really ready to be a great football player? Man, can you step up and be, you don't have to be them, but you got to be the best version of you, and are you ready to do that? I think time will tell, but it won't be for a lack of talent or ability. I think there's a lot of talent and ability in that room, and we certainly know Coach Rasheed's a great teacher. He's done a great job of that, but I think the fortunate piece for that room is you have Isaiah Lee as the cornerstone. That's, man, there's a bell cow in there that's going to lead the charge and at least lead the standard day in and day out.
Matt, under Nate, is the offense going to be any different, or is your expectation just that it'll be better?
You know, I think the word for us is just consistency. You know, scheme was not the issue. You know, we've got more scheme than than anybody out there. The scheme is per se not the challenge. I think the consistency and the how is really where we've dove into. You know, even just, man, how do you call a play? You know, how do we make sure, you know, we give the quarterback the time to dissect the play and be at his best? I think the global how is probably the most important thing right now offensively, is just how we do what we do. And I think that piece of it will lead to greater consistency on the offensive side of the football. I think, again, there were some great moments a year ago on the offensive side of the football. It's just very inconsistent. And I think finding that consistency is absolutely critical for our success moving forward.
Last question from Rob here.
Sorry, Matt, to sneak one more in. Wanted to broaden from the defensive line to the defense in general and extrapolate, because you know, from the outside world, you look at not only you lose Will McDonald, MJ Anderson, you lose Orion Vance, Anthony Johnson, et cetera, et cetera. A, how hard is it to be so consistently good on that side of the ball? And B, what's the challenge this year to make sure you stay at or near the top of the conference there?
Well, you know, I think that again, that's a great question, because you lose two phenomenal leaders. And, you know, but I would also go back to a year ago and I would say, you know, there were a lot of questions about last year's defense, you know, and, you know, I'd go back to, you know, a little bit. I think there was probably a hair of drop off in 21 in the way we played defense, and I thought we really came back to life last year. And so much credit obviously goes to the leadership of not only Coach Haycock and our staff, but to Anthony and Orion and Will and the way they led. And I think the big thing for us is having that leadership, having those guys. And, you know, you got Isaiah Lee, you certainly got Gary Vaughn, you got a TJ Tampa, you know, you got guys that have played a lot of football here for us. And, you know, I think that's the key to success in our program, when the veterans are humble enough and unselfish enough to bring everybody else with them. That's when we play great, not just on defense, but really across the board. And I think that piece of it is something that, you know, makes you feel confident about what we've got coming back. I think we know who we are. I think we've mastered on that side, certainly how we do what we do. You know, John talks about that all the time from a defensive perspective. Really not what we do. It's kind of how we do what we do. And I think you have to have players to buy into that, to demand that standard day in and day out. And, you know, they've got to be sprinkled in all those position rooms, because, you know, the coach, at some point, they shut us off pretty fast as coaches. You know, I'm not naive to that. I actually got that figured out pretty quick, right? That, you know, the players listen to the players. And when your best players demand the standard day in and day out, great things have the ability to happen. And I think really on that side of the ball, you know, we lost some great leaders, but the one thing those leaders did is they taught the next group how to lead and how to be ready to handle the challenges of leadership and standards and holding people accountable. So grateful for those guys, quite honestly, and certainly they did a phenomenal job, and really excited to see this next group come in and be ready to lead.